Welcome to another inspiring conversation as part of SF's Inspiring Women interview series. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by someone who has dedicated her career to driving meaningful change, whether that is helping businesses connect with talent, developing the digital skills landscape, or advocating for inclusion in tech. Vickie Pargetter-Garner is a leader with extensive experience across business development, academia, and digital change. She is currently Director of Digital Skills and Commercial Impact at Tech West Midlands, where she's leading a transformative initiative to bridge the digital skills gap across the region. Beyond her professional achievements, Vickie is a passionate advocate for social mobility and making digital careers more accessible. She's also an Ironman triathlete competitor and mum to a 6-year-old, so she knows a thing or two about resilience, determination, and balancing ambition with everyday life. I'm looking forward to hearing more about her journey, the lessons she's learned along the way, and her advice for the next generation of women forging their own paths in STEM and business. Hi, Vickie. Thanks for joining us. Can you start by telling us a little bit about your early life? Where did you grow up? What were your school and your family life like?
So I was born in Coventry, so I've always been a Midlands lass, and raised with my younger brother and mum and dad. I went to school in Leamington. I went to an all-girls school, so always surrounded by pretty powerful women, I think, from an early age in life. It was a really supportive environment. Mum and dad never put too much pressure on me. They always allowed me to follow my own path, which was great because I was pretty headstrong from an early age. My dad was in the family business, which was funeral directors, and had been in the family for generations. And I saw him working hard over the years. And when it's your own business, a family business, and particularly something like funeral directors, you're on call 24/7. And remembering Christmases of an early age when Dad would have to go out, and see a bereaved family, for example, in the middle of Christmas dinner, and that kind of work ethic. He worked really, really hard and long hours, and that sort of resonated with me, I think, in that making me want to do well and succeed, and seeing what that success looks like. And I think that was imprinted in me quite early on, and sort of stuck with me for my career, really.
Amazing. So your career path, can you tell us a bit more about your career?
Yeah, so if I go back a bit to university days, and even before that, as I said, I had ambitions to go into the family business, and I knew business was what I wanted to do. I'd seen that firsthand at home. I'd lived in and around it. So at A-levels, I did a A-level business, and then I went on to find a business degree at university. So I went to the University of Birmingham to study commerce, and quite a while back now, but back then we talked about really sort of big global brands, multinational brands, selling often false hopes and promises. And that's who I assumed I'd go and work for, somebody like that. I've got a real interest in marketing at that point, and took modules that would kind of exempt me as far as possible from the Chartered Institute of Marketing exams, and realised that was perhaps a career path I'd like to test and experiment with after university. And of course, when you leave university, the reality is you don't necessarily go and work for one of those big, sexy brands that you've been studying. And actually, I ended up working for a research and consultancy company. And we did public sector research, and we would advise on public services and genuinely do things that made a difference to people's lives. Actually, the research that we did would shape services to improve their lives, and that's where I realised my value set. And I think that has stuck with me for a very long time. I've become a very values-driven person, and that's what's driven a lot of my career choices. So from there, I went to University of Birmingham, where I had nearly 13 years in various roles there. And it was there where, really, very fortuitously or randomly, however you want to look at it, I found the world of digital and tech.
Right.
And my role at the time at the university was very much around creating relationships for the purposes of collaborative research with industry, so bridging that link between academia and industry. And we went into a pandemic, and people weren't really interested in the research side, so I sort of looked at what was going on in the region at the time and what business partners needed, and spotted this real gap around the digital skills space that we could, as a university, really happily fill. And that's where the start of that journey came from. So very random, as the best things are in careers, I think. And yeah,
so you realised that was your path, this digital skills path?
Yeah, it was that light bulb moment. Genuinely, it sounds a bit trite, but I think it's not something I'd ever really had an interest in. I'm a naturally curious person, but I'm certainly not somebody that's curious about necessarily tech. In anything, I'd probably say I was a technophobe. And the world of tech and seeing what it can do for people, how it can just help people's lives in the broadest sense, as well as the really mind-blowing stuff that's out there, it just fascinates me. So yeah.
So touching on that, you've mentioned to me before that you're a big believer in using technology as a force for good, particularly improving accessibility for people with disabilities. What was it in particular that led you to that passion?
Yeah, so I've recently taken on a role for a local charity called Focus Birmingham as a trustee, and they support severely disabled individuals and people with sight loss. And going into the daycare service and actually seeing real life examples of how tech is enabling people that are non-verbal to communicate for the first time, to be able to say, actually, I really want a cup of tea. You've given me coffee for the last 5 years, but I haven't been able to articulate I don't like coffee. It's these little things that, we all take for granted, but completely transform people's lives. And I think that is so, so important. And it really helps to level the playing field for those who've got access to technology. And obviously that's a whole other side issue, and the skill set to use it. But for those that can, it really is a huge enabler.
So, as you know, these interviews are all about inspiring the next generation, and we know women are still hugely underrepresented in tech. What do you think are the biggest barriers in 2025 that are still holding women back?
Gosh, where to even start? I mean, there are just not enough women in this space. So I think there's a whole piece about relatable role models and seeing someone that looks and sounds like you in those environments. But there's still a huge issue around the perception of a role in tech. And if I use an example that I'm going to borrow, and I'm sure they won't mind, but from one of my partners, charity called Tech She Can, and they work in schools with schoolgirls from primary age upwards to really try and inspire them around what a career in tech could look like and break down some of the myths. And they often start a class with, a straw man figure, and they get them to decorate and embellish to see what somebody who works in tech looks like. And they start off with, for those of a generation of my generation, somebody from the Jurassic Park series, if you remember, the guy who sat in the basement with all of the screens, and he's a large chap, and he's bold, and he's got his glasses, and he's got his supersized thing, and he's really geeky. And I think, sadly, there is still some terrible perceptions what working in tech is about, and we need to break down those barriers. The great news is the work that they're doing and others. At the end of the lesson, one of the girls redrew her stick person, and she put a cape on, and she drew herself, and she drew her afro hair. She says, "This is me, and I'm a Marcom's digital marketing expert," And that journey to take people on, but we need to start early, as well as educating people of our generation and older, that it isn't this big scary thing, which it can often be perceived to be. And there's a whole raft of issues of, perhaps once you've got people into the organisation, is then how do you make female talent sticky to your organisation? How do you help them thrive and survive? Because they are still very, very male dominated.
Because I think I've seen a stat somewhere that says the problem isn't necessarily getting them onto university degree courses. The uptake numbers are fairly similar, but it's then once they get into the workplace, people aren't staying. So what do you think could be done better to help women, stay in jobs in tech or in STEM?
Yeah, I think broadly there is a lot of good work going on in this space, but we still need to do a huge amount more shouting about what a successful career in tech looks like. Reminding people, I think, and this is really critical this day and age, is that to be successful in any career, be it in arts, culture, be it in healthcare, be it in environmental, clean tech, you all need technical skills, you need digital skills to thrive. And I think tech is often seen as a bad thing, but I think there is a lot out there, and we touched on, that using tech for disability, but tech for good is huge, and really trying to promote that. I think because women like myself will tend to be, I'm not wanting to generalize too much, but much more values orientated, and that enabling tech for good is, I think, a huge selling point on that. And then obviously you've got the whole piece around women being carers and how we support women in the workforce at various different points in their life stage, be it as a caring responsibility for children, be it caring for their parents and adults, or be it going through things like the menopause, and how a predominantly male-based office deals with that kind of thing. So it really does go into the culture of the organisation, I think.
That's interesting, because I know you've mentioned when we've spoken previously that you've worked in some heavily male-dominated industries and faced biases along the way. How have you navigated them?
Yeah, in my early career, when I was working for the research consultancy company, it was public sector research. So a couple of the sectors we really specialised in were waste management, housing, police, and they were very male-dominated industries, particularly back then. And my role was often going out and being at exhibitions, being on the stand, speaking to people, and I think a lot of the time, the men would perhaps just think I was there
make the coffee,
to make the tea,
make the
coffee. Yeah, exactly. But to actually be there as somebody that's got something to contribute and can help and assist them in their business, and actually getting that airtime with them in the first place, I think it just makes you quite resilient from an early age. And I think I'm quite thick-skinned, so I try and let things kind of go over my head a little bit and say, well, that's not on me, that's on them, it's their behaviour that's not great. And I think back then I wouldn't have called it out because I was young, and I was still finding my feet and certainly finding my confidence. And this day and age, I would definitely make a point of calling that out. And if I saw that happening to another colleague, for example, I would I would address that, because that attitude is not acceptable, it's completely dated, and needs to be addressed.
Definitely. So you mentioned there about your confidence, how that's grown over your career. I know you've done quite a lot of intentional work on your confidence, especially in relation to public speaking and speaking to large audiences. What strategies have you used to help you with that?
That's a good question. I think practice until you become comfortable. There's a phrase that's used quite a lot, fake it till you make it. An early career, I guess, there's a bit of that. Bizarrely, I did actually used to do public speaking competitions when I was very little. My great aunt was a speech and drama teacher, and from an early age I used to go to her house and have lessons, and that, I used to love that week, that day of the week. And I guess from there I had latent knowledge, about how to project your voice, how to present yourself. So I knew the skills needed. It was just the confidence to get up and do it, particularly in front of a room full of peers. I think if it was a room full of strangers, I was slightly less nervous. But when it was people I knew and people that knew me, I just thought there was that whole new level of scrutiny that actually that isn't what they're there for. They're there if they're your peers, they should be supporting you and buoying you and there is your cheerleading squad. And I think, it took me a while, but I got there. And I found some great comfort in breathing exercises before I actually got on stage, really just to bring the nerves down and practice your power stance and things like that. Little tricks that I think people on stage use and stage coaches have sort of passed on. And you just sort of build up this little bank of things that individually probably won't make a difference, but over the years you add them all to your armory and then you get more and more confident.
Becomes second nature.
Yeah.
What's the best piece of networking advice you've ever received, or one that you'd pass on to others?
Yeah, when I was young, all my roles have required a lot of networking. I'm in relationship roles, that's what I do. But when I was younger, if I was going to networking events, it would usually be for the purpose of drumming up new business. So I used to go in thinking, oh, I've got to go and speak to this number of people and I need to get these outcomes. And it used to really stress me out. And then I had some networking training and somebody said, you need to flip your mindset. You need to go in, remove the spotlight from you and put it on other people. So it's not about you, it's about other people. And people love talking about themselves. So you go in with a few questions that you might want to ask people and you put the spotlight on them. And that just removes so much pressure from me. And little things like if you're in the queue for lunch, pass somebody the plate behind you, almost act like the host. And that will start conversation. And because you can guarantee the person behind you in the queue is as nervous about the situation as you are and as uncomfortable. And I think the other thing really for me is just enjoy it. And I know that if I'd have said that to myself when I was at the start of my career, I'd have gone, don't be ridiculous. It's the most terrifying thing ever. But I do now and I enjoy it. And as you said, my network is hugely important to me. And I've built a tremendous regional network, one that I'm really proud of actually, and people that I've met from my network I'm really pleased to now call really good friends, people that I'll go for a drink with on a Friday night, and that is through the power of network, and that's what we need, and we need to support one another, and that's really important.
That's nice. You recently took a big leap in your career and moved away from the safety and security of an employee you'd been with for the past 13 years. How did you navigate that change?
It was really risky. I left with nothing to go to. But yeah, it was a values-based decision and it felt like the right thing to do. And being the breadwinner of the family, as I said, it put a lot of pressure on. But I took the leap of faith and I think had an inner confidence around my network and my skill set, and hopefully my reputation in the region. And upon leaving, I then just sort of busied myself inviting people for coffees and finding out what people thought I could go into, because I went with a really open mind.
Amazing.
I knew it had to be regionally focused and I knew it needed to be relationship driven. And fundamentally, number one priority was it aligned with my values. And I said, and if it could be in the tech sector in the region, that would be great. And then, I was invited down to some events at London Tech Week. And I thought, well, I want to stay in the tech sector. So let's go down there, let's do some networking. And I bumped into Mike from SF. And he told me about this role and the rest is history. And so, really back to that power of the network, it's absolutely critical and you never know when you're going to draw on it. And sometimes from a personal perspective as well as a business perspective, you never know how people can help. So yeah, I was really fortunate, total leap of faith, but it was absolutely the right thing to do and I've not looked back.
Amazing.
It has been a complete culture shock. Going from sort of being one of 9,000 staff to one of 5.
Yeah.
But I'm really enjoying it and I think it's a great sector to be involved in.
you've got a 6-year-old, and I know you've mentioned that becoming a mother was a big turning point in your career. So how did you navigate that transition? I know you've talked a bit about imposter syndrome and how that impacted you. So what did you do to overcome that when you returned to work?
Yeah, I mean, it really knocked me, I have to say. So we didn't have a great birth experience, and I was really quite poorly afterwards. And I think that in itself had knocked my confidence outside of work. But I hadn't anticipated the knock-on effect it would have on the return to work. And because I have a relationship-focused role, because it's a lot of out-of-hours engagement work, I thought, God, well, how on earth am I going to do that with a little one? You know, it's just impossible. How am I going to cope and have these high-level strategic conversations when I've had 2 hours sleep? Because the sleep deprivation, as we know, is really, really hard to deal with. And I think in some ways I was fortunate because I'd lost a lot of my network over the 12 months. I'd lost contact with them while I'd been on mat leave. And I just started to try and kind of re-engage everybody, and then we hit pandemic, and of course everybody stopped going to events, so which was a blessing and a curse, I must admit. So a blessing in that I wasn't trying to fit in all this out of hours stuff, but a curse in that I had to think differently about sort of reimagining my network. And then of course you find things through LinkedIn, and then there's online events, and you just, from that, actually my network has been stronger than ever before, and that regular contact. And I missed being in the office, I missed being around the team, so I scheduled lots of calls with my network because I wanted to have that human interaction while we're all locked down. And that's where it's just grown from.
We often hear about the mental load that working mums carry. How do you personally balance career ambition with family life?
I'm not sure I do, if I'm being really honest.
Do any of us?
No. I often think I'm in survival mode. But you do your best. I think I've always been a naturally driven person, and I've always wanted to climb the career ladder. But I think having my son change my outlook on life. I'll still be ambitious and I still want to climb, but it's how I do that and what I'm prepared to do. So I think I've had to be a lot more rigid with boundaries that I've put in, both at home and at work, to make sure I give everything as much as I want to. I've had to have a bit of a chat with myself and say you can't do everything like you used to, and some things will just have to perhaps not be quite where you would have envisaged because you physically can't do it all. In the early stages, when my son was at nursery, my husband actually had a couple of days when he had him at home. So, I'm the main breadwinner of the family, so I was the one that came back to work. So that was an interesting balance, and also, quite sad because I guess we grow up as women thinking we will be the ones having maternity. I think it's really great that actually in the world of equal opportunities that the men are getting more opportunity to do that. But you do feel that perhaps that was time you would have liked to have had that you won't get back. So you're constantly juggling the guilt of something, the guilt of, I would have loved to have given more to that at work, or I would have loved to have given more to that at home. And you've just got to try and find the happy medium that doesn't completely scramble your brain.
Has becoming a mother changed the way you advocate for flexibility and inclusion in the workplace?
I think, yeah, absolutely. I've always been pretty on the ball for making sure we are as inclusive as possible. I was known, I think, previously for creating an amazing team culture and very inclusive one.
So even before COVID
before,
times.
yeah, I think. So yeah, I'm a huge empath. I always take time to listen to people, understand their family life and what's going on at home if they want to share. And I try and create an environment that supports people, because if we treat people like adults and with respect and acknowledge that they've got things going on outside of work, you will get the best out of people. And it's pretty common sense. But so it's always been in my DNA to do that. But now I've got, you know, my own son, and I know those pressures, and I know, you know, you're thinking about how am I going to fit the school drop in around that event, and or am I going to be back in time to do the school pickup at the end of the day? You know, thinking about when you schedule your meetings, when you schedule your events, and just generally your policy around flexibility is really important. And I think from a relationship point of view, even when it's not your team, when it's the networking and things you're doing outside, always be really mindful of that. And I always, you know, say to people what time of day suits you, you know, and try and work with them and their schedules.
So we heard in the introduction how you're a keen Ironman triathlon competitor. And you've talked a lot in the past about how important sport has been. It's a non-negotiable part of your life. So can you tell us how you think sport has helped to shape your career, and who in the world of sport really inspires you?
So, I mean, I was into sport from an early age. I think this comes from my mum was really sporty, and that was kind of instilled in me. We were always outside. I was always running. It just is absolutely ingrained in everything that I do. And it's also for me a huge thing for my mental health, you know, getting out, going for a run. And yes, I did an Ironman, but that was a long time ago. It was definitely pre having my child. I would love to get back into it, but you know, training for that. And at the time I had a really full-on job, and I was doing sort of 16 hours a week training on top of insane hours at work. And I nearly broke myself along the way, but I was determined, and it's that focus and having something to aim for. So, yeah, that has always shaped and always helped. And, you know, some of the best networking I've ever done was actually on a bike ride for Cure Leukemia from London to Paris over 4 days. And, you know, the networking I got out of that was absolutely phenomenal, as you can imagine. So, yeah, you can bring sport into your fun, and my triathlon club is a local club, and it's got over 500 members, and it's full of very impressive people. And again, I'm always networking because they're people that can benefit from me, and vice versa from a work perspective as well, not just from being buddies when we're out running up the fields in Cannon Hill Park. But yeah, so it is really important. And in terms of inspiration, I think more recently, I'm a big fan of Helen Glover, who's obviously the GB rower. Because she's now a mum of 3. Her eldest is a little bit older, about 6 months older than my son. And, you know, seeing her and following her on Instagram and seeing her journey back to then go back to the Olympics after having children, and her dedication, but she's also just a really nice human being as well. So that's really, really inspirational. You can see her values shine through, and that's quite important.
Yeah, it is. So finally, in the spirit of inspiring other women, is there a piece of advice you'd like to give to women starting their careers today, or to those returning after maternity or adoption?
I think for early career people, I would just say, don't hold back. Be yourself. Be your genuine self. Because not only is it exhausting putting on a facade and trying to be someone else, you won't be happy. You won't achieve the things you want, and people buy into you for you. And people can tell if it's not genuine. And have that confidence to be yourself. And don't wait for permission, because, you know, I wish I'd found that confidence earlier in my career, but, you know, I didn't. And that's just the journey I went on. And people get telling, oh, you know, be confident, but that's easier said than done, isn't it? But, you know, if it's from having meetings with your networking, being buoyed by them, or being buoyed by your friend group outside of work, you know, I've got fabulous friends that, you know, if I'm ever struggling, we will WhatsApp each other, and then we get like, you know, your instant gratification of, no, you're great. And, you know, you feel like you can go out and do it. Those affirmations from your friends, and surround yourself by other strong women, I think, that can lead you and help you with that confidence and support you. And values, Just stick to your values, because, you know, if something is contradicting those values, again, it's going to be tough. It's going to wear you down. Have that inner belief in what's important to you and follow that. Yeah.
Nice. Lovely. That's great advice. Thank you. Thank you, Vickie.